Welcome on in, golf fans. It's your boy Gsluke here with our DFS and betting live stream for round 3 of the Memorial Tournament. First off, welcome on in. Cheers wherever you guys are. I've got a little Red Bull over here myself, so keeping myself awake over here on a Friday afternoon, getting ready for moving day out there at the Memorial, but excited for it. Going to break down everything to expect out there for Saturday, including a look at the weather, how that'll impact play, what to expect out there in terms of playing conditions. Then afterwards, go through the DFS side, talk through ownership, how to approach that slate out there on the Draftkings, whether it's for GPPs or cash lineups. And then after that, we'll go through some of the prop sites. So Draftkings over there with Pick 6. You also have Underdog and PrizePicks with their prop sites. We're going to go through some of the stuff over there as well. In terms of yesterday's exposure, or I should say today's exposure, right? Maybe yesterday, if you're watching this in replay, ended up doing pretty well over there on Showdown. I know a few people down there in chat that seemingly took advantage of themselves. And then over there on the prop side, a really unlucky day when it came to pairings. Our hit rate was about average when it came to our exposure, but when it came to our pairing luck, every single slip that lost went 1-1, was one slip, one prop away from going out there and cashing. So there were a bunch of hooks involved with those near cashes. And luckily, I was out there on the golf course hanging out with some buddies that didn't have to see a lot of that happen live. So I didn't have to deal with some of the heartbreak involved with those sweats. So I went out there, played a round of golf today myself. I'll be doing it again tomorrow, so I'm looking forward to that. It's been quite a while since I've truly had a golf weekend, but going to be watching it over there on the tablet on the side. As you guys know, right, sweating out my golf. So looking forward to it. Hopefully you're having a solid Friday and a stoke to get into it. So first off, before we hop into it, just want to mention our sponsor for this live stream. Of course, for all your different DFS needs, make sure to go ahead and check out the Ship It Nation. There's a link down in the description of this live stream, but of course they are a partner here with the channel because they cover everything outside of golf, right? So they cover golf over there on their website, but they're more of an all-encompassing sort of option. So if you're somebody like myself that's a DFS enthusiast that has one or two sports that you're an expert on, maybe even make your own projections, like somebody like myself, but if you want to play something that's outside your expertise, a lot of times it's hard to do that, right? You know, it's hard to make those projections without having that insight into those sports. So what I do, even as somebody that's a pro DFS player, is I go to other tout sites. And of course, the Ship It Nation has been useful for a lot of my MMA exposure, but there's the NBA playoffs, some hockey stuff. They've got baseball going full force over there. Everything is available over there on the Ship It Nation. So a perfect partnership here with the channel because of their all-encompassing feature. And they're one of, if not the best value in the entire industry. They're not price gouging you over there. You can get 10% off a discounted membership there too if you use code Luke10. So it's already, I think, a very reasonable price. And then if you use that code, you're going to get it even cheaper out there for yourself. So it helps your boy with the kickback, also gives you that discounted membership. And once again, if you're looking for an all-encompassing one-stop option, they are the best in the industry to check out. And they are the ones that I endorse out there with this live stream. But let's start off with a little look at the golf course from today and the golf course and weather out there for Saturday. So in terms of round 2, just like what we had for Thursday, the PM wave played quote-unquote easier, and this time it was a lot more severe. The morning wave, and I say morning wave, right, because it's not like it was a clear 50-50 wave out there where there's a 2-3 hour split between the tee times, but the first half of tee times played about 1.7 over par. Your second half of tee times played nearly an entire stroke easier. Now, I couldn't really tell you why. I was out on the golf course for a lot of the PM wave. I can tell you that from the observed weather today, that it's pretty clear to me what happened, right? You could see towards the end of play, frankly, right around 3 p.m., which is when I left for the golf course. So maybe I was unlucky with not being home, which hopefully tomorrow the same thing doesn't happen, but I'll be away for more of tomorrow. You can see the winds completely died down. The players went out there, took advantage of the golf course, and we saw some scoring, especially late, the last like 2-3 hours of play that we don't typically see at this golf course. So early on, the players were roughed up by that wind. For Saturday, I think a lot of people would expect that trend to continue because if we take a look at Saturday's forecast, you can see we have it up over there on Data Golf. But to get a little bit more of a precise look over here, we'll go to the windy side. I'm not sure what's going on with the satellite look up there, but this forecast at the bottom is accurate for what we want to look at. You'll see that in the morning, they're calling for next to no wind. So nearly ideal conditions. The only thing I would say that's holding it back from being ideal would be the temperature, but they are teeing off at about 9 local. So they're going off a little bit later out there at, I think it's, let me double check the exact tee time. Let's just go over here. Check out the tee sheet. It's 9:20 when they're starting with Andrew Putnam and Cam Young. It is two sums off of hole number 1, so no shenanigans with the split tees, three sums, or anything like that. It'll be your classic two sums off of hole number 1. And by the time they're teeing off, it's up to almost its maximum temperature. It's at 66 degrees. Rest of the day, it'll be there in the mid to low 70s. So if you're going to find an edge, if you take some of the first players off, they're going to finish most of their round with nearly ideal conditions. Perfect temperatures, low winds the whole way until about 3 p.m. local time, where your leaders are starting to tee off. So if we go over here to the tee sheet and I show you when your leaders are teeing off, you can see the last group off is going to be at 1:45 local. So it's an early PM. Sometimes you've seen that at 2:45 or even 3:45 local time for a start time. It's not nearly as late as what we've seen for a few slates, but it's still going to matter quite a bit when it comes to your weather conditions. Because if you're one of those late starters, and again, I don't know what's going on with this overhead view. Maybe you have to zoom out a little bit. It looks like, whatever. We'll deal with it, right? You get the point. The important part is at the bottom of the live stream here. And let me make sure I'm not covering it up with my face there. Is that we have lower winds in the morning, and then as the day goes on, mostly from about noon onwards, the winds start to kick up. So your sustained winds go from about 5, maybe 7 miles an hour up to 10 to 13, 14 miles an hour at their peak in the late afternoon. And then your wind gusts, they go from non-existent in the morning to the lower 10 range, the mid-teens range there around like 3 p.m. And then the late afternoon is when you really see the wind gusts kick up. That's also when the sustained winds get to their maximum at about like 13 to 15 miles an hour. And that's when the wind gusts get to nearly 25 to 30 miles an hour. So your later starters, when they're finishing up their rounds, which will be at about 6, maybe 6:30 p.m. local time, are going to be playing in some pretty gnarly winds. I would say kind of similar to what you saw around noon for today, where a lot of people were having those blow-up rounds. So it's a dicey end, but in general, I think conditions from the weather perspective aren't anything crazy notable. Like these winds in general are pretty typical of what we'd see on the PGA Tour. Today, they were about double in terms of your intensity with your sustained winds, and your wind gusts were 30, sometimes even about 35 miles an hour today. So I don't think we're going to get anything like that out there for Saturday's action. What we might get, though, and why I want to circle back to this sheet over here, and I haven't mentioned what I'm going to do with the weather yet, right? Because we got to talk about this weather situation. The morning wave played, quote unquote, so much harder than the afternoon. I think part of that, right, is the winds dying down. I think almost all of it can be attributed to that. But day one, some people might point to, and I could see following this mindset going, well, day one, right, the morning also played harder than the afternoon, and that wind thing really didn't happen out there for Thursday's action. So you might say between that and then what we saw for today, where it was an entire stroke difference between the quote-unquote AM and PM players, that maybe you do want to stack the guys up top, the guys going off later that are playing in the higher winds, which to me would seem like a backwards kind of idea, especially considering that historically, going back, not just this year, right, looking back 2023, 2022, year before that, whatever the case may be, that historically that the PM wave has played significantly harder than the AM wave almost every time that we've played at this golf course. This course is known for baking out, and it is one of the more firm and fast golf courses typically over the weekend that we see. So I know that the rain that they got, about 2 inches of rain that they got on Wednesday, is shaking things up a bit. They have a sub-air system that I haven't heard a lot about this week, and I'm hoping that they're getting cranking, and I'm thinking that there's a chance that this golf course is significantly firmer as early as tomorrow morning out there for these players. And if it's already firmer tomorrow morning, if they do indeed crank those sub-air systems, try and get them a little bit crispier for moving day and the weekend, your PM wave, when you have those winds starting to kick up, you have that sun out there for a majority of the day, that golf course might be the kind of course that plays significantly harder in the afternoon. So I point out the scoring averages just to give you all the information and obviously make your own decisions. But what I think is going to happen for moving day, and I was wrong today, which honestly, I was not expecting to be wrong. I told you guys, right? I would be surprised if the morning played harder than the afternoon, and it did. And again, I'm surprised with that. I was not expecting that to happen. I think that the morning is going to play easier than the afternoon tomorrow. You've got the lower winds there, right? It looks pretty straightforward, at least on this HRRR model. Just to do our due diligence here, make sure we're checking all the boxes off. This NEM model is calling for a very similar kind of projection. Low sub 7 miles an hour for most of the morning. Afternoon wave is much more significant, both from the sustained perspective, which is in the lower 10 to maybe 12 mile an hour range, and then your wind gusts, which go from almost non-existent, about 7, maybe 8 miles an hour, to closer to 15 to even 20, 22 miles an hour. If we go over here to this Medio Blue model, it's a very similar picture. Once again, winds cranking up as the day goes on. Icon model here on Saturday, once again, but maybe a little bit of a later start with the winds kicking up. You can see it's closer to like 1, 2 p.m., which is when your leaders are teeing off, just for some perspective. GFS model here, same thing. ECM model, just for completion's sake, same kind of picture out there with the projection. So it's not all that often that the projections are very much so kind of hand in hand with what they're expecting. But that's the picture out there for Saturday. So unfortunately, this satellite look, like I said up top, this white part is normally going to show us the beautiful Muirfield Village Golf Club. But go check out right here. So the important parts at the bottom, hopefully that hit home for you guys. And we can start talking about some DFS. So let me bring up my projections. We'll catch up on chat, see what's going on. Again, cheers to you guys. Say hi in chat if you guys haven't already. Smash the like button too. If you guys haven't already hit that like button, do that. Help your boy out with getting this more exposure and sharing with the rest of the community, right? Let the algorithm know that this is some solid content that's helping you out so that other people can also get that benefit. So it's a mutual benefit. I'd appreciate it a whole lot to you guys. And like I said, cheers. Steven took down second in the big $5 today, which should have been a pretty nice, hefty sum in terms of a payout. So good to that. Great. Congrats out there, Steven. What's going on, Ross? Solid Friday. Let's say the same thing for DFS. Let's have ourselves a solid moving day too. Cheers to that. What's going on, Dave? Best golf channel on YouTube, he says. Appreciate the kind words, man. Cheers to that. Let's get it. What's going on, Frank? You are the GOAT. Bounce back like a ping pong. You know it. Yeah, that's for the props. But like I mentioned, very much so a disappointing day there. But if we've got 2 more rounds to work with. The Gala, great play tomorrow. Tee to green, amazing. Yeah, I like the play today. He worked out for me in quite a few of my lineups. But I could totally go back to him. I understand the play, and I think that statistically you're 100% correct. He sets up very well. What's going on, Deacon? What's going on, Phil? We're going to circle back to specific questions after I've gone through the players that I want to point out. The reason being that a lot of your questions will probably be answered, right, if we're talking about that specific player already. But if you have any questions, throw them down in chat right now so I can do them all in one go. So just more so I want to focus right now on the strategy side. So we're going to talk to some of my top plays. I'll talk about my reasoning in getting to some of these players, which is much more important about the plays because, this talk that we're about to have, this little charade that I'm going to go on here for the next maybe 2-3 minutes is the most important part of this live stream. And how to build lineups out there for Saturday. Without a massive weather edge, like the morning wave, I think might get about a half a stroke advantage. If it does firm up as the day goes on, if the winds are gnarlier in the afternoon, that's probably about a half a stroke advantage. The winds aren't going to get out of hand. The course hasn't truly firmed up all that much as the week has gone on. Now, if they do turn on the sub airs overnight, maybe it is a larger edge than what we're expecting. But with the current stats, with what we're looking at from a forecast, I'm only projecting for about a half a stroke edge. So I am going to be taking some earlier starters for leverage because if you're new to playing PGA DFS, maybe just new to playing Showdown in particular, the guys at the top of the leaderboard, the guys that have played well, that are teeing off late, are your chalk out there for round 3 Showdown. Oftentimes when the winds are kicking up in the afternoon, when we get those firmer conditions, The move is to go out there and avoid some of those players up top, because first off, you're getting leverage by avoiding those players in some of your lineups. And then also they're playing with firmer greens and higher wins. Now, I think that's partially true for tomorrow, but it's not as true as what we'd be hoping for, to go out there and just fade all of the late guys. I don't think that you can fade all of the later starters. I think that there are plenty of guys that are going to go out there that are up there or close to contention that could shoot something like 3-4 under par, which would almost certainly make the optimal lineup. This golf course is playing over par. Shooting something like 3-4 under par means that you're probably making 5-6 birdies, which is as close to a ceiling round as you're going to get. I know Tony Finau made 8 birdies today. I am almost certain that that is the number one mark in the entire field. He made like 3-4 bogeys, also like a triple bogey on the card to give away a lot of those strokes. But that's the kind of round that you're looking for. If you can get to 8 birdies, you're 100% going to be the top scorer. 7 birdies is probably the top scorer tomorrow, even with some moving day pins. So what is far more important out there for your lineups is getting those type of scores. And I think that some of those PM starters, right, a Xander Morikawa, right, obviously some of the players that we're going to talk about that I think are capable of doing that, I don't think you want to completely avoid the top end of the board. You have a lot of your elite tier players that are at the top end of the leaderboard. Like you'd expect that one of these difficult, firm, fast kind of tests really makes that cream rise to the top. And you've seen that even over just 2 rounds. And I think when we get to Sunday, it's going to be even more evident that that cream is rising to the top. Some of the scrubs that are up there, I hate to say it, Adam Hadman, Sia, Seabez, Sia, right? I don't see us staying out there through Sunday. Now, we've had the Denny McCarthy's show up at this golf course in the past. So maybe 1 or 2 of those guys holds on there by the time we get to Sunday. I wouldn't expect one to win. Billy Horschel did win this event, though, so it's certainly possible for somebody of that caliber to get the job done. The point being, though, that if you're going to take some players that are going off late that are going to go out there assert themselves into contention, it's a Xander Schauffele, it's a Morikawa. I wouldn't recommend doing it on a slappy that's going off late. If you're going to play a slappy, if you're going to take somebody in that 6-7K range, which you're going to have to do, right, in pretty much every single lineup, you might not have to go to the 6K range if you're not being as aggressive up top. But even in the 7K range, you're taking some players that are far from a sure prospect out there in your lineups. Don't take the chalky guys down there. Don't be taking the guys that are going off late in the hardest conditions, that are playing when it's a little bit firmer, it's a little bit more windy, because in my opinion, maybe I'm wrong about it, right? Like I said, the PM did play easier today. That's because the winds died down. That is not expected to happen tomorrow. If it is that 180 shift that we're expecting there, don't play the guys in the harder conditions that are going to be higher owned. Maybe take some of the chalk that's going off later, because like I said, they're just the best players in the world to begin with. But when you're mixing in cheaper options, the best options are the lower owned ones, the ones that are going off early that still have upside, that whether it's some of the shots gained metrics, whether it's their approach play, just birdie or better percentage in general, give you some semblance of hope that they can go out there and make 5-6 birdies. If they can get to 7 birdies, 8, like somebody like Tony Finau did, they're going to be the absolute nuts. So that is my recommendation for Showdown, is to perhaps splurge on some of your chalk up top, and then with your players down low, use that to get leverage and perhaps take some of those earlier starters. It's worth noting that Scotty is, of course, blacked out in here. Some of the spots are going to be blacked out, right? We're going to have plays that we talk through on here. Some of the blacked out spots are guys that I'm not taking, but it is worth noting that Scotty Scheffler is in my player pool. So just for full transparency, I want to mention that off the bat. I am playing him out there tomorrow, and he's in, of course, the last group off. So if I'm willing to play the guy that's the last group off, right, there's still going to be some PM guys that I'm mixing in. And then, of course, when we talk about Xander, Morikawa, I mean, they're off in the last 2 hours of tee times as well. So from the weather edge, I think there's a little something there, but nothing that I'm fully going all in on. So Scotty's ownership, by the way, I've got him at about 30%. So he is going to have some ownership. But like I was mentioning before, I'm taking some of that ownership up top. This is a common trend. If you've been here in the live stream, it's how I build a lot of my lineups when it comes to playing Showdown, is taking more of my ownership up top, right? Splurging on just some of the better players in the world, and then taking my stands at getting different down there with my mid to lower tier players. So let's see. Let's talk about Xander Schauffele first. So you know about Scotty, right? I don't really have to tell you all that much about why I'm playing him. He's the best player in the world, hands down. So even at 30%, I'll play him. But Xander Schauffele at 18.4%, I don't want to say that he's lower owned than he should be, but 18.4% is very reasonable for somebody that's coming off a PGA Championship win. Round 2 maybe wasn't his best stuff, but round 1 was one of the sharpest players out there in the field. And though he's going off a little bit later, give me some Xander. He's a player that I'm more than willing to look for a bounce back. He's one of, if not the best player in the field when it comes to birdie percentage. The reason why I trust him a little bit more than Scotty when it comes to just going out there putting up a ceiling birdie round is Xander Schauffele is a very talented putter, right? He can get hot with the putter. He can make some of those 20, 25 footers. You'll see that from Scotty. He'll mix in a few, right? From time to time, maybe 1 or 2 out there in a round. Xander, when he's really, doing his best stuff, is capable of making 3-4 of those in a round. And when he's mixing in those easier birdies on, maybe it's a drivable par 4, maybe it's some of the longer par 5s out there, that's when you have one of those ceiling rounds for Xander. So $10,900, I'll play him at what I think is pretty reasonable ownership. I'm taking, again, I told you I'm playing Scotty, so I'm not playing that much over the field. I have about 30% Xander Schauffele. So part of that is because I'm taking a pretty big stand on Scotty. I'm playing him in about half my lineups out there for round 3. So I'm still trying to get a little bit of leverage on Scotty. I'm also giving myself a little bit of buffer because maybe he's a little bit higher owned than what I'm accounting for. So just trying to kind of account for that for some of my exposure. So not getting... I would want to take 35, 40% of Xander if I possibly could, but it's not possible when I also want to play Colin Morikawa in lineups. So I'm going to have some double spend ups. I'm going to have lineups that go Scotty plus Colin, maybe even Scotty plus Xander. I still haven't built my laps, but I have a pretty good idea of what I'm going to do in terms of my builds. I'm probably going to have some lineups that do go Scotty Xander, which is kind of tough to pull off. Obviously, Scotty at 12,700 it's a tough thing to go out there and add up another 10K plus player. But because there's some 6K players that I think are more than playable, the whole way down to about, what is it? My cheapest players actually over here at Cam Davis, 6,400. There are guys the whole way down to Cam Davis that I think are very playable that make those lineups work out. So that's what I'm handling the top. Rory's out there. You could probably guess what I'm doing with him if I'm playing a lot of the guys around him. Guys like Hovland, Aberg are also getting some ownership themselves. So it doesn't mean that you have to fade them, just like Morikawa too. Xander Schauffele at 18.4%. It doesn't mean that you have to fade these players up top, but just know pretty much whoever you're taking towards the top end of the board, 9, 10K range, everyone's getting ownership with the exception of Justin Thomas. Justin Thomas, I've got at sub 10%. Tommy Fleetwood is still a hair over 10% ownership. Hideki's getting closer to 20% when it comes to his ownership projection. And then the Sahith Coco range, Max Homa at $8,700. These sort of players are in that like 15, 16% range when it comes to their ownership projection. So there's a lot of ownership to be spread around up top like you'd expect for pretty much any slate out there at PGA DFS. The guys that you'd get mega leverage on for playing are the players like JT that just hardly made the cut. To give you another example a little bit further down, Benny and Alex Noren, believe it or not, are slightly lower owned compared to some of their counterparts. Shane Lowry, a little bit of a leverage play there at a +3 score. A Sungjae Im, a Jason Day, who we'll talk up here in just a few minutes, are all players that you'd get at lower ownership. And the further down the board that you go, the more leverage plays that are going to be available just based on pure lineup construction. And then on top of that, I think the tee times are more conducive to taking your studs up top, right, that are going off a little bit later. And then those, more dud kind of players to go out there and spend up for studs, take them with the weather being a little bit better. So that's how I'm going about it. So JT, let's talk about him. He killed me on a few props today. I took him for an over on greens, and if you couldn't guess with his score, he didn't even come close to hitting that. I think he had like 2 through 13. I was on the golf course, so I wasn't sweating it too much. Like I said, a few props today that were just they weren't bonehead mistakes. They were just bonehead plays from the guys that were out there playing. It's this kind of golf course where if you don't have your best stuff, it goes real sideways. Your bad round's not like +1, +2. Your poor round around Muirfield is usually like +5, +6. So it kind of exaggerates your play in either direction. If you play well, you can shoot -3, -4 easily. That's what we're looking for in terms of a ceiling score. But yeah, my boy JT, I'm going to him even after what he did to me. I've got him at 9% ownership. So if you're looking for a potential option up top to take that's going off early, there's not that many to choose from. right? Like even your guys that I think are slightly lower owned, like a Sahith, Coco, Max Homa that are even par, their tee time, just to give you some perspective, let me double check on the over and the tab over here. They're going off at 11:30, so they're in the top 25 in this golf tournament. So they're going off close to midday, where it's not going to be firm at that point. I don't think it's going to be truly like firm at any point during this round. But what it is going to be is about an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours into the round, is when those winds are going to kick up. By the mid-afternoon is when the course is going to be pretty crispy after being under the sun all day. Those players are going to be susceptible and going to be exposed to some of the harder conditions. So somebody like JT obviously could be taken as an advantage, but guys like Max Homa, Coco, Sahith, not so much. And even par doesn't look that sexy, but believe it or not, they do have a relatively late tee time. So I'll put that disclaimer on somebody like Max Homa. I still like playing him out there for tomorrow, but guys like Sahith, Coco, a lot of the guys that are even par are maybe a little bit misleading. You'd probably think that they're teeing off earlier than they are, but they're not. They're going off closer to 11, maybe closer to noon, which is an okay tee time, but it's certainly far from ideal. I'll take Max Homa for a little bit of a bounce back. Solid putter, somebody that can get hot in a hurry. And the ball striking has been there. And this golf course is one that you can hit less than driver at. You saw a lot of players take that strategy today into great success. A lot of players just leaned into their iron play, went out there and made a lot of putts. And Max Homa, he did a lot of that round one. Today was a little bit more scratchy. I do see the upside of him going out there and potentially putting it together with the iron play. Sam Burns, high upside player, somebody I will always take in Showdown when he's relatively low owned. 12% is certainly far from a pivot play, but he's low owned enough that if I took him in 20, maybe 25% of my lineups, then I'm getting the leverage that I'm looking for. He's $8,100. He's more so got the firepower that I'm looking for. And over rounds 1 and 2 has not had his typical energy. He's normally a player that can go out there, generate a lot of birdie looks. And because he's such a sound putter, such a very consistent putter in terms of gaining to the field, he'll normally go out there and cash in on a lot of those birdie looks. Now, first few rounds, he's generated quite a few looks, but he has not made those 5 to 12-foot putts. He's a player that normally is absolute money in that range. So once he starts to make those birdie looks to go out there and generate fantasy points on Draftkings, first off, going to help out some of my main slate lineups, but more importantly, also going to be very useful for Showdown tomorrow if he can go out there and accomplish that kind of thing. So a player that I think is due for some regression. Also in general, when he's had easy looks, like he's set up wedges into some of the shorter par fours, he has not capitalized. And historically, if there's a wedge range that he really hones in on, it's from 100 yards and in, where you're going to have 2 shots out here at this golf course. In the 7Ks is where I'm really trying to get different to the field. There are a few players that I'm still taking at some ownership, but one of them does have an early tee time there with Cam Young. And in terms of pure like pivot options, Jason Day would be at the top of that list. I've got him at sub 7% ownership. Let's see, 6.7% out there in that tab there. But Jason Day's a local who's going to have a lot of support out there. He's the kind of player that even just making the cut is going to have a lot of incentive to go out there and play well. He's going to have support out there. He's not going to want to go out there and disappoint his fans out there, family, whatever the case may be. And also is a player that has played this golf course a bunch. He's got that experience. His form is a little bit hit or miss. For Showdown, we're okay with that when it's just an 18-hole sample. We've just got to get that lightning in a bottle. And for a GPP play, which is really where I would exclusively play him, I would avoid him in single entries, higher dollar stuff where you don't want to take on too much risk, cash, that kind of thing too, right? You'd want to avoid them there. But in the large field lottery kind of contest, a player like Jason Day gives you a huge leverage opportunity and is a player that could catch that lightning in a bottle. So somebody that I wanted to point out from that perspective and that I'll be taking in some of those kind of contests. Denny McCarthy at 7,400. I've got him at 10.4%. And what I'm looking at with Denny McCarthy is elite tier course history, and he's still got some ownership. I've got him at 10.4%, but he's far from high owned at that number as well. If he was there at even par, maybe -1, -2, he'd be 15 to even 20%. People know the course history. He's done it year after year. It's been 2 years in a row where he's had that top 10 finish. And for whatever reason, even the +2 to this stage is very respectable for his price tag in DFS and just for his class of player. This is the signature field event. This is not a golf course where you can fake it around it. And for whatever reason, regardless of the form that McCarthy has, when he gets to this golf course, he seemingly plays solid golf every single time. So I would not be surprised if he went out there, fired maybe a 3-4 under par round and got himself right into contention, or at least a shot, maybe a shot or two out of contention out there on Sunday. Cam Young is going off early. I've got him still getting ownership, and a lot of this is just respect to the rest of the PGA DFS community. In the past, I might have projected him closer to 10, maybe 12%, but I've got him at 15.5%. Because people are going to play alone to Cam Young. People know that he's just a better player than the price tag, and he's got the early tee time. So if you're looking for more receptive greens, or at least slightly more receptive greens, also the lower winds, he checks both of those, and he's going to have that aggressive, free mindset, not being in contention. And that's worth noting with the players that are going off earlier too. Maybe the scoring conditions are only like marginally easier early. I think that would be a fair assessment based on some of the forecasts. I do think the mindset difference, though, of players that are out there in the first 2-3 hours of tee times is huge from the showdown perspective. We need players that are going to make 5-6 birdies, maybe 7-8 if they possibly can. A few guys might be able to pull that off out there for moving day. If you can, that's going to be what you need to get to the optimal lineup. The guys that are out there and not protecting a lead, they're not 1-2 shots off contention. They're not in the top 5, top 10 starting the golf tournament, are going to be a lot more willing to take on pins, to go out there, be aggressive. There's a lot of pins. I was looking at the pin sheet before. I have it up here when we go to the prop side of things, where it's just over a bunker or it's tucked just over a water hazard. You're going to have to take on a lot of risk to go for a pin. Somebody like Cam Young, for example, that's why I'm mentioning it right now. He's going to be taking aim at every single pin location. He's not going to give a flying fuck out there when he's going out there and taking on a water hazard. Because he's not in contention. He doesn't care if he finishes in last. He's still getting a paycheck if he finishes in like 45th this week. So at 15.5%, give me that in Showdown. Give me the nuts conditions and a Cam Young especially that has no pressure and just doesn't give an F. Next up, we've got Will Zalatoris at 7,200. I've also got him getting some ownership. He's playing a little bit better than Cam Young. Tee time is still not ideal, though. Like I said, these guys are even par going off later than you'd expect. But I'm not marrying myself to weather for tomorrow. So I'll still play somebody like Willie Z that is frankly just way too cheap at $7,200. Again, very similar in terms of pedigree to a Cameron Young. And at that price tag, you're just saving so much salary. Like normally these guys would be 8K options. So if you do go Scotty and then perhaps Colin as a second man in, which is very aggressive for your first two players, rather than taking 8K options, which you kind of want to mix into that lineup, well, you've got like Cam Young or you've got a Will Zalatoris that you can use as a substitute, and you get that $1,000 back because they're only $7,200, $7,300. So that's kind of how I look at it with some of my builds when taking these two players. And there'll be big spots of ownership for me. I'll probably have 30% of both. Don't be surprised, by the way, if in like single entries that these two were higher owned than I have here. All right, I've got them at like 14, 15%. Single entries, these could be 20, 25%. Would not surprise me. Some of the higher dollar GPPs, so maybe not like the lottery, like the 525. These guys could be like 20, maybe even slightly above 20% ownership, and I wouldn't be mind blown out there for Saturday's exposure. Then we have got one more play I want to talk through. But once again, like I said at the beginning, when we got here to DFS, it's not so much the plays that I'm talking about. It's the mindset, right? It's the perspective. It's why I'm getting to the plays that I want you guys to take home from this live stream. If you want all of my plays, they are posted over there on my Patreon page. So check out the link in the description of this live stream if you guys want to check that out. Everything that is blacked out is, of course, not blacked out on the version that I post on there for my Patreons. But it's not necessarily about the plays. If you want those, you can check them out on the Patreon. But the purpose of the live stream is to give you perspective in what I'm using for my process. To go out there, maybe take a nugget or two of what I'm doing and incorporate it on top of your own process. I'm sure a lot of you out there already have your process. If not, right, and you're trying to build your own process, maybe try and, I don't want to say completely copy what I'm doing, but at least try and take parts of mine and use that to build your own process. So that's the more important part that we have here. Let's talk through Cam Davis and then wrap this up with building a lineup or two together, and then hopping over to the prop side. So Cam Davis, $6,400. First off, a lot of salary savings with the $6,400 price tag. Plus one score. It's not the earliest of tee times, but it's, mid to early morning. So it's, I don't know, it works. Sorry, not early morning, mid to like early afternoon. So it's not the worst tee time in history, but low ownership and a player that I think is playing a lot better than people may realize. First 2 days, +1. He's up there in the top 30 at this stage. A player that got through in the U.S. Open qualifying, beat Adam Scott out there in that playoff, which, by the way, was a very thrilling playoff, was a lot of fun to watch. But a player that, when he's playing well, normally sustains that for runs. And at +1, I know it's not a sexy score, but if this guy was like -1, -2, he'd probably be 15, nearly 20% owned down here at $6,400. This might be the last chance that we have to get him at any sort of low ownership. Because if I'm right, and I happen to catch him when he shoots something like -3, -4, that'll be in contention heading into Sunday, and I'll be able to go out there and play him before he's 20, 30% owned. Because if he does that, if he's like -4 heading into Sunday, he's probably going to be 25, 30% owned out there for the Sunday Showdown slate. So I want to have no part of that, right? If he's 30% owned. So why not play him when he's 8%? Before he potentially moves into contention. And it's moving day for a reason, right? These guys like Cam Davis at +1, you shoot a low round tomorrow and you're even, maybe even 1-2 over par, you're going to be squarely in it. Now, you might not take down Scotty Scheffler, but if you're trying to finish in the top 5, you're going to have plenty of the guys that are there under par shoot over par out here for Saturday, especially if this course is as firm as it historically is over the weekend. I think a lot of that is because of the sub-airs that they have on property. So we'll have to see. You'll know pretty early tomorrow morning what we're going to get in terms of conditions. If it's bouncier tomorrow, you could even have a lot of these guys coming back. So somebody that's 1-2 over par right now is a lot more live than you think to finish top 5 than normal weeks out there on the PGA Tour. So that's what I'll say about the setup. That's it for my player pool, the players that we're going to point out. Again, there are more guys that I'm playing. Check out the Patreon for that entire version. On there, I've got my ownership that you can use for going out there and making your personal exposure. Also, my projected points to use in your optimizers for building your lineups. You got my modeling, which is from the main slate, by the way, to give you some perspective on how guys fit the course. All over there on the Patreon, which again is in the description of this video. And it's $15 a month, by the way, right? To get to the DFS tier, which will give you access to the spreadsheet, which is a great value. If you're looking out there to add to your DFS portfolio, I don't cover a bunch of different sports, but I do cover golf, and I do it rather efficiently, I'd like to think. So let's go over here, bring up Draftkings, and build a lineup together. If you guys are just here for DFS, we are going to build a few lineups here together. But after that, we're going to be moving on to the prop side. So if you're in here live right now, over 100 of you down there in live chat, go ahead, smash like button if you haven't already. I want to get this at least over 50 likes with all of you in here, if not higher. So let's pump those numbers up. Do the boys solid out there, like I said before. I'll ask for you guys, right, is to smash that like button, and feel free to ask me any questions you have there in the chat, which we're going to do here in just a few seconds. Like I said, a lot of questions I was letting kind of pile up down there. We're going to go through all of those here in a second before we hop into props. So in terms of, building a lineup, I don't want to spend too much time on this. I do want to get into the questions in chat, but in terms of trying to figure out where you're going to get your leverage, a lot of times I try and tell people to figure it out beforehand. When you're putting together your player pool, have an idea before you're selecting your quote-unquote guys and your plays for the day, where you're going to get different, where you're going to go out there and get your leverage to the field. For me, it's usually the same, right? Normally, I'll take a little bit of chalk up top. I'll still differentiate with, JT or something like that in the 8, 9, maybe even 10K range. But a majority of the time, where I'm getting most of my differentiation is 8, 7, and definitely in that 6K range. So it's the same thing for me here. So if I'm starting with a Scotty Scheffler up top, which, as I said, I will be doing out there for some round 3 showdown lineups, if I even want to be a little bit more aggressive with my second man in, perhaps throw in JT would be aggressive, but we could even be super aggressive and take Morikawa. We're just going to take JT here to make it a little bit less stringent when it comes to putting together our salary. That puts us at about $7,000 remaining per spot. If we go down here and mix in that Cam Davis, who I do think has upside to make some birdies. It's not so much who you're getting down low, it's also what it opens up top. So now that we mixed in a $6,400 player, it puts us at about 7,200 remaining. Now, we probably want to mix in maybe one guy at the top end of the 6K range. So an Eric Cole, Davis Thompson, even an Eckroat at 7,100 would fit that bill. I'm going to throw in Davis Thompson just for the salary savings. Now we have 7,500 for our last two spots. I do think Dietrich is an intriguing option, especially going off super early. Also, low-owned leverage spot that you can mix in. So here we do have a relatively chalky Scheffler, but we have a ton of leverage here. And because you're spending up with Scheffler and you mixed in a leverage spot with JT, even if we were taking chalkier guys down low, like let's say we wanted to play Bradley here, right? Who's -5. He's a top 5 at this point, going to be very popular out there for your Saturday showdown. That would be perfectly fine in this kind of build. Now, am I playing Keegan Bradley? Personally, I'm not, right? So this is a build that I wouldn't get to just because I have him out of my personal player pool. But if you wanted to splurge on that ownership, you could make it work because of all the leverage you're getting in these other 4 spots. Dietrich sub 10%, same thing with Thompson, same thing with Davis, even JT sub 10%. When you have 4 guys that are going to give you that leverage to the field, you know, Scheffler's chalky for sure. Keegan Bradley, I don't know his ownership off the top of my head. I know he's getting some ownership there too. That's totally acceptable out there in a GPP lineup. So I think some people overthink their lineups. They go low at overboard when it comes to the leverage. I'll fade my guys, right? There are definitely lineups where I'll have sub 8% ownership at like 5 of the 6 spots, even all 6 spots sometimes out there in GPP lineups. But that's not my entire portfolio. I'm going to have lineups, especially this week. I had like 65% that had Scotty Scheffler at pretty high ownership for the main slate. It'll be the same thing out there for Saturday as well. So pick your leverage beforehand, kind of have a game plan for your lineups before you're going out there and clicking names. If you're going to take more chalk down low, maybe know beforehand or maybe select beforehand and be like, I'm going to get a little bit differentiation in that like 8, 9K range. Like know beforehand, you're like, okay, I've got some 6, 7K chalk. I'm going to take somebody that's different in that 8, 9K range, right? I'm going to force in somebody that's maybe sub 15, sub 10% would be even better out there in that lineup to make sure that first off, I'm not duplicating myself. And second off, that I have enough leverage in my entire lineup to go out there and enter one of those lottery contests. And even if you're in a smaller field GPP or a single entry, you still want to be thinking in a very similar sort of fashion, maybe a little bit more lenient. You don't have to be as different out there for a smaller field contest, but you still want to be thinking along the very similar type of line and getting leverage against the players that you're playing against. So that is my strategy out there for DFS. Now let's go over any of your questions, like I said before, which I'll bring up my DFS sheet for so we can go through projections, ownership, that kind of thing, and get this thing going. So if you have any questions about specific players, now is the time for it. And we're going to talk props here in about 5 minutes. So after I go through these questions, there's a bunch of them down there. It's going to take us a little bit of time. After we do that, we'll be talking props. So if you're just here for DFS, I appreciate you guys still. Best of luck out there for tomorrow. Only thing I ask, like I said, smash the like button. Also subscribe if you haven't already so we don't miss the content out there for round 4. So tomorrow night, similar time, going to be going live. You won't want to miss that out there for Sunday. But let's catch up on this. Where were we at before? A long way back. What's going on, Deacon? He said, you ready for some more fire content? Appreciate that. You finished 6th in the $5 single entry. That's a really nice score then. Good stuff. What's going on, Phil? What's going on, Kep? Who is having a good day tomorrow that didn't today? So just kind of going through my exposure, JT would fit that mold. Homa to some extent. Burns, you could say that about as well. There's a lot of options that we just went through, but if I had to pick one for you, JT, he's got no pressure now. I think the game was a lot better than the scorecard indicated. It's not like he played well today by any means, but he had flashes of brilliance, especially towards the latter half of his round. First 12 holes, what I saw before I left for the golf course were atrocious, and by the end, he at least, I don't want to say he made it look decent, but the stats got better by the end, that's for sure. How am I doing? Ready for some, sorry, we already went over that. My bad. What should be your max exposure on a player? What percentage do I do for everyone? So There are exceptions to the rule, but I normally go 2x for most of my leverage. Somebody like Scotty, I mean, I'd play in 100% of lineups, right? I wouldn't be against locking him. Otherwise, Eric, I'm more so looking at about 40, maybe 45% for your typical PGA Tour player. Now, I'm not going to disclose anything more than that. Those kind of conversations to me are where I need to hold back and kind of keep my edge when it comes to building my lineups. But Scotty, yeah, I'm not against locking. I'm going to play him probably about 65% out there for tomorrow, which, at least per my ownership projections, is about double the field. So that's the idea there. But yeah, 45% is what I'll say for a max on other guys. And I'll leave it there. I don't want to disclose too much. Hopefully you can respect that. Derek says, you just wanted to say hi because you're awesome, but also Hoagie sucks. Perfectly respectable take. What's going on, man? Am I fading Scheffler? No, I don't have stones to do that. What's going on, Doc D? He said, as always, thank you, my dude. Thank you for stopping by, my man. Kim Jong says, 2 favorite plays where JT and Dietrich ended up being losers. Yeah, happens to the best of us, man. I've had sleets where my favorite players have gone sideways. I've been there with you, that's for sure. Can't believe Bill McGirt won this event before. Yeah, you got Horschel who won it. A couple of weird guys, especially like 5-10 years ago. Of late, it's been a lot of the who's who of golf. But yeah, man, you're right. It is a wild one, especially McGirt, huh? What's going on? Did you see Xander was the last on the range? I didn't see that, Jason. That is good intel, though. I normally like backing that kind of player. My boy Bryson does that a lot. You saw that from Rory at the last major. So, maybe it works out for him. Cheers, Michael. Like you said before, smash that like. You heard it from Doc. Don't let the guy down, right? Smash that like you said. JT, Colin, Xander are some of your favorites. I think those are sharp takes. They're 3 of my favorites too. For a course based on these conditions, right there with you, my man. Do I like Hoagie? I probably say that you're around late on the Hoagie train. He did play particularly well, especially early in his round today. I am not like a hater of Hoagie, though. I'd say I'm like a 6 out of 10 on him. I like him more than others like him on tour. I give him a lot more respect than most do, mostly because of the approach play. So, yeah, 6 out of 10, but nothing crazy for me. He does not ask for much. You're asking about the like button? Hey, I appreciate that too, my man. Thanks for tuning in, Seth. Any Putnam. So no Putnam, but if you're looking for a low-owned play, Rami, he's one of the lowest-owned players on the entire slate. So I was running projections just before I went on the live stream here, and he's sub 2%. I'll tell you that much. So he's, yeah, like I said, essentially unowned. So if you're looking for leverage, he is one of the best options. Even if you play him like 5-7%, you're going to be well over double the field, probably like 3-4x. What percentage do I typically stop at? So yeah, 40-45%. Deacon says, what are my thoughts on the Postman? Yeah, JT Postman, Eric must like him. So if you're looking for a leverage play, he fits that mold as well. And it's not like he's playing terribly, right? He's even part the stage. It's just that a lot of fan favorites are priced around him. So part of that is the Cam Young, Will Zalatoris effect. Part of it is Victor Perez and his form from last week. You got Brian Harman, Denny McCarthy with his course history here that I think people are going to play over the Postman. So squeezed in between all these players, and of course, Hadwin, one of the chalkiest players out there for the next day. Even Lee Hodges, people I think would rather play than JT Poston. If you're looking for a leverage play, it's not like I said, it's not like he's playing horribly. He is that sort of player for you. Do I like Connors for a bounce back? I think he's got it in him. He's going to be a lot lower owned than he otherwise would be after being tied for the lead in -7. So if you're just trying to take a shot on somebody, right, you know that there's a little bit of risk there. I think that he's worthy of that. Connors was an over 50% of yours today in your ship shunk. Yeah, I wouldn't be playing 50% of somebody of his caliber. Let's put it that way. If I'm playing 40%, it's like a Xander. It's a Rory, that sort of player. If it's a weaker field event, Aberg, something like that, or I'd be playing like that. But normally for me, it's like 30-35% on a stud. That's a more realistic number for me on terms of exposure. Thoughts on Aberg was really good tee to green, but could not make a putt. Sounds like a really good play then. Normally that's what we're looking for out there with round 2 stats. I'm more so looking at round 1 and 2 stats, Cliff. That's how I made my player pool. It went through a lot of my plays. And round 2, right, that's why a lot of the bounce backs made my way into their player pool down low. if they had a pretty good ball striking day in round 1, right, I still look at that and I still count that out there for my round 3 exposure, because if they did it round 1, they can certainly repeat that for round 3. And just because they didn't play well for today's action does not mean that they can't bounce back. In fact, that's going to give them lower ownership. I think it gives them that more free mindset, right? Because growing off early, they're not protecting a lead. I think that matters quite a bit. Connors looks great through 9. Yeah, he did, didn't he? Hey, even if he played him today in Showdown, he made all those birdies. He played a lot better than 75% of the field when it came to his fantasy score. So I don't know. I invested a little bit in him, but I don't know if I'd be that upset about it. Let's put it that way. What do I make about the torn meniscus for Aberg? Yeah, sharp take. I did hear about that. I saw a tweet about it. He didn't want to talk about it, so I didn't see the interview, but that doesn't surprise me. But it is clearly real, or is it, you're asking? So if you're asking if it's real, I'm not sure. I would imagine that it is. I saw a lot of tweets about it from pretty respectable people. So I would imagine that he is dealing with the meniscus. But I also know people that have had a torn meniscus and they still pretty much did everything normal out there in their lives. Now, if they were like lifting heavy things, like I saw a few people, I used to work in a motorcycle shop. My family owned one when I lived up in Pittsburgh growing up. When I was a child, I used to do some work around the shop, whatnot. Some of the workers there, actually multiple, had torn meniscuses at different points. And they'd like grunt, like it hurt, like if they had to go and like pick up crates and shit like that. But they're not doing that on a golf course, right? His swing is actually pretty smooth. So I don't know if I'd worry about it that much. In fact, if I was somebody that had like a long-term outright on him at the US Open, I'd feel pretty good about it. Thoughts on Dunlap and Bez being able to back up his good round? Unlikely, I would say, Brian. Unlikely. They are scrubs for a reason. People prove me wrong all the time, but that's normally when they go out there and like win their first golf tournament. I wouldn't count on it though. You're pretty confident it's real. Yeah, I agree with you there for sure. But you're asking about like in golf. I'm thinking that he's going to be all right. Yeah, dude. Like, I mean, look at his week so far, right? He's like, what, -4, playing pretty well. This is a course where you can't fake it. And like Brian said, he looks fine so far. I agree with that. I got to see his first 4 or 5 holes. And day 1, right, I got to see his entire round. He looked perfectly fine. He's, like I said, if you had like a long-term outright on him out there for the US Open, I feel pretty good about it. He's a decent fit for the course. He's got a very well-rounded game. And part to playing Pinehurst is having a high apex height and being able to take on some of those greens. So I haven't looked at any of the prop boards yet. I don't really know what we're getting into on this side, but that's it for DFS. Like I said, if you're just here on that side and hopping out of here, I still appreciate you guys. Just go ahead, smash like button if you haven't already, and take down a GPP or two and make your boy proud. But let's talk about some prop averages. So we've got the prop averages up here. And frankly, guys, I think it's going to be very tempting to probably want to take some like overs on birdies or something. So let's see what we have for birdies. So yeah, they do have them a little bit higher, but you'd think with moving day pins, the conditions, right, they got so much easier, right? In general, like the winds aren't all that bad for the next day. I think a lot of people's hesitation would be to maybe take like some overs on birdies, maybe even some like unders on strokes for guys that are like 72 and a half strokes. I just want to be the first to warn you guys. I have a feeling, a sneaking suspicion, that it is not going to play as easy as what you guys think. So that's the PrizePicks board. I haven't looked at the Underdog board at all. Again, I had to do my projections and then go live. So I didn't have time or luxury to do that. But that's totally fine. We have the time to do it here. So their strokes board looks maybe even slightly higher than what they had on PrizePicks. But I think kind of consistent across the board. So we'll find some differences, I'm sure, when we go through and examine them a little bit closer. But what I want to throw out to you guys, and I just want to go back to some of the old averages at this golf course. Let's bring out the Memorial. So let's just go back to the last few years. And this is why I say this. And this is going to be a little bit of a hot take. But I think it might play like 2 over par hard, or maybe even harder than that. And here's the reason for that. So last year, round 3, there was some rain that came before the round. Moving day pins, it played pretty easy. Now, there's not rain this time around, so I don't think that's going to happen. But look at Sunday. Sunday, it played 3 strokes over par. Let's go to 2022. So if we break this down by 2022, it did play a little bit easier on Saturday, but again, on Sunday, it played plus 2.22. Go back here to 2021. It played plus 1.42 out there in moving day, plus 1.1 out there on Sunday. Go to 2020. Like, you just look at this event over those kind of years. The hardest rounds are almost always over the weekend. Sunday is going to be a brute. Like, you can see that, right? Some of these Sunday rounds are like +3, like sometimes even worse than like +3.5. But let's see, this is before the renovation at this point, when it's like 2019, 2018. You can see, right, when the course was like playing under par before they renovated the golf course. But oftentimes the most difficult rounds here are on the weekend when they get that sub-air going. Now, they're probably going to move up 14, make it drivable. So that's going to help out scoring a little bit. I think it'll boost the birdie percentage there. But your late-end starters, I think you're going to make a fair amount of birdies, especially your players that are more slappies, that aren't used to being in that position. So I do think that if we can find some line value on birdies, that potentially we can find some spots to mix in. But I'm mostly kind of want to look for scrubs going off late that we can fade. Like guys that are playing above their head, like an Adam Hadwin that ended up going under by 0.5 today. He was one of those hooks, by the way, that just kind of killed us, or at least killed me out there in the soul a little bit when it came to our exposure. But like those kind of players are the fades that I really want to look at here. So we've got some sports books up. You've got DraftKings, FanDuel, we've got Caesars. So we already talked about these averages. I guess I didn't call them out. We didn't truly go through these averages yet, but scoring average was 1.22 over. Birdie average was 3.3. Bogey average 4.11. Your fairway average went down a little bit to 8.9, and your green average went down quite a bit, actually, an entire green per round to 9 per round. Now, this green and regulation average went down partially due to pin locations, but also due to the firmness of the course, and realize that that's probably only going to continue. Partially, it might stay around this number, I would say, because of the cut line, right? Getting some of the lower tier players out of there. But this course is only going to get bouncier as the week goes on. And the reason why I wanted to show you those scoring averages before, right, is I wouldn't just go out here, look at this scoring average of what did it end up being, like 1.22 over. You'd be like, yeah, it's probably going to be like that again. You're like, oh, it's going to be like a stroke over par. There's a chance. I'm just telling you, we'll have to see. You're going to know early tomorrow morning. If you wake up early tomorrow and you turn on ESPN Plus and you're watching that early coverage and you see ball hit the green and ricochet like it did at the Wells Fargo Championship, where it just like moves like 20, like bounces 5-6 yards in the air, just know that that PM wave is going to play much, much harder than you saw this one stroke over par average. So it'll be interesting to see what they do with the sub airs if they do try and crank it up. But that's why I'm a little hesitant to like go out and put all my exposure in tonight. I think waiting until we see conditions is prudent for maybe a majority of our exposure. I'm definitely going to still enter stuff tonight. So we're still going to enter stuff here for the live stream. Patreon will still probably get at least a few more slips there for each slip, each site as well. But tomorrow, if we end up getting some crazy conditions in either direction, could be a lot of slips that add on top of that. So I want to check a few things out. So there were a few lines that were catching my eye there, and that I want to double check the odds on. So it doesn't look like DraftKings had that many guys up here. So let me refresh this, see if perhaps they added a few more. So yeah, actually the one guy I wanted to compare to wasn't there. So let's see if perhaps FanDuel's doing us more of a solid and giving us more to compare. Let's see, let's do round scores. I'm looking for Adam Hadwin. I want to compare his strokes line because I feel like 72.5 is too low. I feel like that's a decent fade spot. But let's see what we have. So perhaps he's on Caesars. I wouldn't count on it, though. So yeah, no lines for Adam Hadwin for whatever reason. I guess what we can do here is try and find a similar type of player and just do a comp for him. So let's see. Thoughts on Pendrith? Just catching up some questions. Decent play, high upside. I'm playing him. Finau under 72 and Aberg under 71. Yeah, I'm okay with both of those. They sound like decent plays. Both are in form so far, playing well. We'll circle back on that. I want to look at some of the odds and stuff. If I wasn't limited on Underdog and PrizePicks, and I bet differently in House O. Sorry, mouthful. And I'm trying to get this Red Bull down. Would I have a smaller pull and mix and match, or do 3 and 4 combos more? I'd probably have more exposure. I would probably mix in a few more lottos. I would also get more exposure to single props. I used to do that a little bit more, but honestly, ever since getting limited and having to spread out my exposure a little bit more, Brandon, it's made me a better bettor. It's shown me that having more volume and spreading out your exposure is a more sustainable and better way to bet. So even if I got unlimited on books, I would probably bet a very similar way. What's going on, Jordan? The greens tighter than a none. Yeah, they were today. Yeah, 9 greens per round is really low. I think that's only going to continue too. I think you're going to see that for tomorrow and definitely Sunday. Hideki might be the most frustrating golfer. He might be. He had a really good round today, didn't he? Made a bunch of birdies. He's an absolute tank, that's for damn sure. So let me see if we can find somebody for this comp at 72 and a half. If you have any questions, whether it's DFS or prop, you can still throw it down in chat. Say hi to down in chat if you guys haven't already. Down there in the live chat, I've got my Red Bull here. This is not a beer. It's not a Michelob. I know it might look like one, but it's a Red Bull, a blueberry Red Bull. It's one of the flavored ones, and I love the flavor. So let's see. So we're looking for 72 and a half on Hadwin. So they have Sepp Straka, who's a better player than Hadwin, in my opinion, at 72 and a half. And he's juiced pretty severely under, which I don't really agree with. We're going to go through these. We'll see what it is, but I guess I don't agree with that much. Fitzpatrick is juiced way under 72 and a half. Man, I like Fitzpatrick. But like Jason Day's at 71 and a half strokes, like that feels a little bit low on my boy Jason. Let's look at FanDuel. I'm pretty sure they're all in lockstep too. These sportsbooks hardly ever deviate from each other when it comes to their projections. The level of groupthink is pretty crazy, if you ask me. So let's look at Sepp Straka. So 72 and a half, and he's juiced a little bit under. Yeah, my narrative, by the way, that it's going to play a little bit harder. I don't know if I want to say like substantially harder, but I think that 1 over par scoring average, it's going to be at least that, if not harder. The pricing on these books is like they think it's going to play even par, which I'd have to say I disagree with. I don't think that's going to happen. Let me see if they have some birdie lines up. I'm sure they do. So for birdies are better, they've got Fitzy at 3.5 and a little bit for the over in terms of the juice. Jason Day's at minus 150 for his over. Oh my, yeah, I disagree with these odds. That's for sure. Especially like these birdie odds for the overs juiced at 3.5. I vehemently disagree like that with that. So let's look at Max Homa, for example. Is he at 3.5 birdies? So he's at 4 on Underdog. Does he have a birdie line on PrizePicks is the question, I guess. He does, yeah, and he's at 4 birdies. So yeah, I guess these sports books, I guess we got to look a little bit more at these odds and the different pricing that we have over here at Underdog PrizePicks. But it looks like they're in agreement with these sports books. Oh boy, hasn't gone great for days 1 and 2. And honestly, I've been looking at the sportsbook odds. I've been trusting them a bit, especially with a lot of my exposure late today. I trusted the sportsbooks and got shafted a bit. The hit rate wasn't terrible. It was about 50-50. So it's not like it was terrible, but I feel like trusting my gut here is definitely what I'm going to do. My gut, by the way, has been for 3 years of betting on golf props. I've made well over $250,000 betting on golf props in the last few years. So I don't just say that lightly, right? I think that this golf course is going to play harder than these sites are expecting. So if I think that's going to be the case, there's definitely value to be had. Now, the best case scenario is to find value compared to the sports books, and that'll be even better value compared to where I'm projecting this, right? Because if I think it's going to play harder than the sports books, if we can find value on these sites for fades, then that would be even better to go out there and mix in. So what I'm going to try and do is let's try and find some fades that are juiced, because if we can do that, ideally, right, especially if I think this is going to play harder than they think, that would be like the perfect spot. This guy says, how many DUIs have I racked up? 0 so far in my life. And if you have one, you're a degenerate scumbag. So I'm gonna send you on your way. You also told me to oil up and to give me a 20 bomber. So I think that says a lot about your character. You've got the maturity of like a 5-year-old. So yeah, I'll send you on your way, buddy. Enjoy your time in Bandland and with the maturity of like a 6-year-old. I'm sure you get laid very often with that kind of maturity. I'm sure the chicks just love lining up to you, acting like you're in like fucking preschool. So let's see where we're at. Jordan, you just know that you're the greenskeeper's worst nightmare. Oh boy. Sorry if you already spoke on this, but do I have any favorite two-ball matchups? So yeah, we can take a look at the books a little bit later. I want to take a look at these props before. I also want to take a look at some of the live golf props. So just remind me here in a bit, Calico, and we'll talk about it when we've got some time. Now, still looking at props. It's going to take us some time. Still looking at Underdog and PrizePicks right now, actually. So you came at a good time, James. That's what we're doing right now. Do you have any thoughts on pick 6? Yeah, we're going to look at that after PrizePicks and Underdog. Any guess where you've had the most success in props? Yeah, I've had all that tracked. It's been strokes and birdies are better. Just the normal sort of lines. Greens, also fairways, have been pretty close behind. Birdie or better matchups are some of the worst, which is why I'm such a proponent for not playing them. It's not just me thinking that they're set up with all that variance. It's also just the stats backing that up. Sub under 3.5 bogeys. I could see taking that. Bogey average today was 4 per round, though. So it's, he's going to have a pretty good round to go under that kind of line. What's going on, Barry? Missed most of the stream. Good thing. Can watch it on replay, but glad to have you late than never, man. Welcome on in. If you made $250,000 innocent, I don't know what you're saying, Colin. Who knows? And you said something about Diddy, so I'm also going to send you to Bamland. Kind of weird. I guess when you mention like money that you've made on props, you get the weirdos that come out. But yeah, if you're gonna act like that, I'll just send you on your way. I don't have patience for people that are just acting strange. I don't know. All right, let's talk through this. So I guess the prop people can be strange at times. If I think there's going to be decent fades to take, like I said, I'm looking for some sportsbook value to kind of back up what we're going with here. So if I'm looking at these like 71.5, you've got some juice on guys like a Tom Kim and 71.5. So it looks like if we can find some 71.5 strokes lines, we might be able to find some juice for the over. So Tommy Fleetwood's a potential option. I know Max Homa had that like minus 140 juice, but even a Matt Fitzpatrick would be a potential option for that. So just going through those, Tommy Fleetwood is only minus 125 juice, so we could probably beat that there. So you can see they actually do have Matty Fitz at 72.5, but Max Homa's there at minus 140. My favorite, at least in terms of the sportsbook value there, would be a Matt Fitzpatrick. But let's see what we have in Underdog. I have a sneaking suspicion that this board might be a little bit better for the fades. So just going through this, they do have Tom Kim at 72. Also, actually, Max Homa at 72 strokes. So perhaps not. Maybe I'm incorrect on that assessment. Looks like 71.5 for Tommy Fleetwood. Same thing for Tony Finau. Victor Hovland at 70.5. So this PrizePicks board has a few hidden gems that we might be able to take advantage of. So we've got the Matt Fitzpatrick prop that I was looking at a little bit before. What else? 72.5 for Seabez would be a potential fade, especially because he's going off so late. I don't think we have a sportsbook line to compare to, which is the unfortunate part here. Maybe Caesars has them. I don't remember if they had them up for strokes or anything like that. Let's see. Nope. So no sportsbook line. Seemingly any of these sites that you can compare to for Seabez. Sometimes FanDuel has us covered, but it looks like not this time around. He feels like another decent fade, though, to mix in. Who was the other one? We were looking at one more before, I thought. In terms of strokes. Let's see, was it honestly Hoagie? I would go back and fade again. I took him for a fade today at 73 strokes, and he ended up paying off. Tom Kim, but he's I wish he was 71.5 that you had over there on the sports books. Hadman at 72.5 for sure. I would eye for a fade even after him going under by the 0.5 today. In terms of birdie lines, I wish there were more at 4 that we could potentially fade because those feel like spots that we could potentially leverage, especially with that push equity there at 4. Greens are going to get harder to hit. So actually looking at this right here, let me find my favorites. Let's take Fitzy out of there just because I think Fitzy's going to play well. We're going to leave the Seabez and the Hadman fades on there because those are probably my favorites just because they're going off so late. They're also playing with the pressure of being in contention in this kind of event. What I'm liking for this green and regulation board is I think the greens are going to get harder to hit. So Adam had him in at 10, could have potentially been a fade, but he's already been bumped down a little bit. Guys like JT Poston kind of stick out as a potential fade spot. Who else? So I'm looking for players that aren't really known for their iron prowess. He would fit that description. A lot of these other guys kind of do. They're players that I know at least in the top half of green and regulation percentage. Now, it's not like JT Poston is a complete slouch with the irons, but he's not an elite tier player in the category. At least historically, isn't always an elite tier player. Let's look at this par or better board. So these guys are at 2.5. At Scotty Scheffler, Xander Schauffele. You've got your next step down there at 3 bogeys or worse per round, and then 3.5 for, look at this, Seamus Power at 3.5 bogeys. Like, I would take that for an under. Like, you could fade at Hadman there if you wanted to, and I wouldn't be against that. Especially because Seamus Power's got a late tee time. Like, that makes him an even better option to go out there and potentially take a stand against. So this payout would suck if we took this in a 4-man. But let me see. Sometimes they have the payouts screwed up for these strokes. So they fixed it. So for round 2, if you took a strokes fade, and you mix it in with a fade for either pars or better or for fairways or greens, it gave you a 3x payout. So unfortunately, they seem to have fixed that. Let me see if there's anything else finicky that we can mess with. So we had the pars or better fade. Sorry, it was the 2 strokes. Was it another? Oh, I forgot about the prop we already took there. Sorry, it was the under on Poston. So that's 2.5x. So they have that patched. What about a Poston fade with strokes? Let's try that. I'm just trying different combinations to see if any of them have that plus EV. I know we're not taking Fitzpatrick, but yeah, they also have that at 2.5x. I guess we're just going to have to tough it out and take that payout shift. So let me take the Poston out here with the Hadman over. That'll be the first flip. I don't know if I'm going to be able to take both of these, though. I might be at my limit out here on this account. Oops, I shouldn't have said that. All right, so we'll take, the under on JT Poston greens, the over on Adam Hadman strokes, and then I'm going to take the under on the Seamus Power prop, and then the other strokes fade, which was Seabez, correct? I believe so. Let's see. My limit? Oh, let me enter one more. So we're going to go with those 2 slips over there on PrizePicks. And again, this prop section is going to take a while, guys, but we're going to go through a lot of value. Why? Back up my camera and stand up for 10 seconds. Dude, what is wrong with these people in chat right now? Jesus Christ. Yeah, this guy's making burner accounts. Yeah, dude, it's crazy. And it's somebody just saying like stupid shit. I'm just going to ban them. Do I have an underdog code? Yeah, Gsluke, if you want to support me out there with that. I appreciate that, my man. Bez smash play was money today. Dunlap smash for round 3. Yeah, dude. By the way, the iron play for Bez was absolutely there. So you're going Dunlap for round 3. I like it. I like the play too. He's a young up and comer. I like the talent level, so I couldn't blame you for doing so. So we do have the Adam Hadman prop over here. If you wanted to potentially fade him there, I want to diversify a little bit. So I don't want to put all my eggs in one basket here. So let's try and diversify a little bit. So we've got Victor Hovland at 70.5, also Morikawa at that same number. In terms of the sportsbook value, those are decent fades. So you can see they have Hovland at 71.5. Morikawa, who's going off slightly earlier, they also have it that same number. Now, both are juiced minus 155 under. So 71's their true projection. So I would probably lean towards their overs, but they are elite tier players for a reason. If we're trying to find a reason to fade somebody, normally we're looking for unsustainable play, right? So if we go here to our round 2 shots gained metrics, we can kind of get an idea of how players would be doing that. And looking at Adam Hadman, who had an even par round today, he was okay in approach. He did gain like 5 strokes in approach in round 1. Had nowhere near that out there for Friday. But his number 1 shots gained metric was his shots gained putting out there for Friday. So I don't love that. It's a part of the reason I want to fade him. But look at this for Christian Bezinhu. He gained 5 strokes out there with the flat stick. That is going to be nearly impossible to go out there and replicate. So that's a reason why I went out there and faded those 2 players in particular. If we go down here and find JT Poston posting lost strokes on approach today. So I think it's pretty safe to say that he'd probably be a player to go out there and want to fade for greens. And then somebody like a Seamus Power here, you can see lost 4 strokes on approach. So if you're just looking at the stat profile, right, these are guys that weren't doing it very impressively, which is why I'm not playing them out there for my round 3 lineups, which is why I knew we could go out there and fade them out there for props. So that's an idea with the stat profile. And what I wanted to bring this up for is so that we can try and kind of target some guys to fade. So the Seamus one showed up right away. Corey Connors had a really bad approach day. So if you're taking him for a bounce back, just know that he's going to have to overcome that for sure. Jason Day lost about 2 strokes over there on that. Let's see, about a stroke over there for Thomas Dietrich. He did end up making the cut. PrizePicks might have a line on him, but I know Underdog doesn't. Let's see, Benny Ann, Victor Perez, Tom Kim should have lines on both sites. He also lost with the flat stick, so I don't think it's impossible for Tom Kim to bounce back. But his approach play today, specifically towards the end of his rounds, really failed him. So somebody that you might want to keep an eye on for a little bit of regression. So over here on the Underdog side, I know they had Tom Kim at 72, so he's kind of taken off the board there. Is Brian Harmon at 72 on PrizePicks? Let's double check. Brian Harmon. He might not have a line, at least based on what I'm seeing here. Nope, doesn't look like he has one over there in PrizePicks. All right, who else could be potentially fade? There's Denny McCarthy at 72. So maybe PrizePicks is the better site for fades, at least based on what I'm seeing right there. Scotty's at 69. Let's see, 69.5 for Scotty over there on PrizePicks. What's his sportsbook line? I guess I didn't look at that one before. He's at 70.5, so he's an entire stroke and a half higher. I have a really hard time wanting to fade somebody like Scotty. He's just such a solid player. I know he's out there in first place too, so maybe he's a slightly less aggressive, but it's a tough scene wanting to do anything in terms of a fade with Scotty Scheffler. So in theory, this over would make sense. I mean, even on PrizePicks, right, he's 0.5 higher, but I don't know if I'm going to have the heart to go out there and fade Scotty. So let's keep him out of this for right now. But a Rory McIlroy, in theory, he is 1 stroke higher over here on the sports books. Actually, never mind. He got bumped down to 70.5, but he is minus 140 towards the over. So in theory, could be a fade. Let me see what they have for these birdie lines. We didn't get a full chance to look at the whole board. I want to see where they have guys like Rory McIlroy at for birdies. So let's scroll down to the bottom. Scotty is at 4.5 and he's juiced over. Rory is at 4.5, but he is juiced slightly under. And the guys at 3.5 are all juiced over, but the 4.5s are juiced under. Okay, that's interesting. So we do have Rory at that number. Same thing with Scotty. So maybe rather than fading him, maybe you just take like the over on birdies. That would be an alternate way to approach this slate. Let me see if FanDuel, sometimes they post birdie or better props, which is just another data point that would be able to look at here. It doesn't look like they're going to have them available, which is unfortunate, but it is what it is. They offer what they choose to do. So nothing over there on the Draftkings side. My goodness. Would I say that Underdog or PrizePicks are sharper? I say PrizePicks for the most part. That is a very general statement, definitely very slate to slate. There'll be slates where maybe I think Underdog is sharper than PrizePicks. This time around, I actually think Underdog has the sharper pricing. At least for strokes, their birdie lines are higher, yet their strokes lines are also higher. I just don't quite understand how they're going about it. What about the youngest guy to qualify for the cut at the Memorial? Yeah, my boy, I can't say his last name. He's got the K last name. He's a stud. I'd probably avoid him, though. People are still going to play him in Showdown. So if you think he's going to be completely unowned, that's probably not the case. What are my thoughts on Rory under 70.5? So if you can get the plus money, I'm not against that, Antonio, right? To go out there, shoot -2. One thing I'll say is they might move up 14T. If they do that, it'll be drivable out there for moving day. But the course is going to be super firm. So I'm okay with that, Antonio. I'm at like a 6.5 out of 10 on that. I think it's a decent lean, especially with that plus 105. But it's also not something I'd be like running to the cashier window to play or anything like that. So for Underdog, we still haven't entered anything, but I think because this board's a little bit better priced, we could look at some of these like green spots. So I was looking at it a little bit earlier. The greens did seem a little bit high. So in comparison, Rory's at 12 right over there on Underdog, right? He's at 11 on PrizePicks. And I do think that the greens are going to be harder to hit. So Rory could be a fade. I'm not going to fade Scotty for greens. Guys, by the way, if there's somebody that you just should not fade under any circumstances for greens and regulation, it's Scotty Scheffler. The guy is an absolute stud in that category and in many other categories, as you would imagine. So let's try and find somebody else that's at 11.5 that is at 10.5 potentially on PrizePicks. So a lot of them are a little bit lower, as you would expect. This golf course is not easy to come by with greens. So a bunch of these guys at 10, 10.5, which we could look for a fade, but I'm trying to find maybe a slightly better projection. Ideally, a below average green regulation percentage player that is projected at 11 greens. So let's see. Let me just open all of these up. So 11 for Morikawa, but he is an elite tier green guy. So that one kind of makes sense. We've got Keegan at 10.5, 11.5 for Aberg. That might be it. So let's at least throw him in the shopping cart for now. And then what do we have Hadwin at? So Hadwin's at 10, probably where he should be. So who else was 11.5? I believe Xander was, right? Up here towards the top. So yeah, Xander's at 11.5, and then there's Cam Young. So let me look at PrizePicks. So Aberg seemingly doesn't have a line over here on PrizePicks. So yeah, nothing up there for Aberg. And then I kind of want to check in on how he played today. I don't know his green and regulation number off the top of my head, but I'm imagining it's 10, 11 per round, something like that. Yeah, he hit 10 out there for round 2. Very average round out there for Aberg. Round 1 hit 12 out there with his -4. 11.5, that's going to be a spot I'm willing to get to as well. And part of that's the line value. I think he'd be at 11 at best if he was over here on PrizePicks, if not at 10.5. Just because of the firm conditions that I'm expecting. So I don't think it's going to let me enter this because I am at my daily limit on this account. So let's see. Yeah, sorry, I'm at my daily limit, but this is a slip that I'm going to get some exposure to here in a bit, if I can. Hopefully it doesn't move before the end of this live stream. So let me bring up pick 6. Let's do that. And then we'll take a look at some of the 2 balls and stuff too. I know we had a question about that before. So in terms of what we have on pick 6, I haven't seen this at all here, so let me kind of digest what we have to work with. So 71.5. These are going to be some pretty decent fades, it looks like, over there for a lot of the strokes, particularly that mid-tier. 4.5 birdies is really high, especially to have that many players at 4.5 birdies. So maybe not as crazy as what we had for round 2, where the birdie board was extremely great for unders, but still maybe a little bit of undervalue there. Bogeys are worse. Yeah, the same guys at 1.5. So I'd probably fade Xander again if you wanted to go back to that fade. So going back to strokes, what I was looking at here before was Tom Kim at 71.5. I would almost for sure be okay with fading. A Christian Bazane, I would for sure be okay with fading at 71.5. If we go over here to birdies or better, there was one, maybe 2 guys I'd consider for unders at 4.5. So maybe not. A lot of these guys are solid players. So like maybe a Fleetwood, like he's not known as a high birdie percentage player. He's better actually at avoiding bogeys than he is at making birdies. I wouldn't hate mixing in that Xander Schauffele over, right? Like I was mentioning before, something like this, or I would probably mix and match these props over here on pick 6. Unfortunately, I can't play them self because I'm down here in Florida. It's not legal down here in the state yet, but those would be my leans over there on that site. So you've got these 2 unders over here on Underdog that I'm going to enter for a slip. Let's see if we can find anything else, right? We did a couple slips over there in PrizePicks. Let's try and do the same thing on Underdog. Spread the love a little bit. Of course, guys, all the exposure that I'm taking is going to be posted on my Patreon page. But for now, check out these few slips that we're going to go through. So I want to look at some of the bogey lines. You know, it was about a 4 bogey per round average out there for round 2. Round 3, it might go marginally down, but I think it'll be in that high 3 range at the very best, I guess I should say. So we already faded Hadwin. I don't know if I want to cross up my exposure too much. But a Victor Hovland at 2.5 birdies, that's going to be a tempting fade for me. Over here in PrizePicks, just for comparison, he is over there at 3. So we do have like a 0.5 discrepancy there, which is, of course, what is that? A whole 20% difference out there from his projection. You've got Aberg at 3, but I also think he's at that number on PrizePicks. Actually, yeah, no bogey projection over there on PrizePicks for him. There's Keegan, 3.5 bogeys. Like I'd even potentially consider taking that one, but I'm gonna be a little bit more picky. Let's find something that I really like here. A Tony Finau 71.5. What is his strokes line? He might not have one for comparison, but let's double check. He does. So he's at 72.5. What is he at over here? Wrong tab. So Tony Finau. So Tony Finau is at 72.5 and he's juiced minus 150 under. If we go over here to Caesars, I think he's probably at the same number. So he is an entire stroke higher. So that would be a potential spot that we can mix in. So I'm going to at least throw it in the shopping cart. There's, let me look at the green numbers and stuff here. So 10 and 10.5, probably stay away from that. 3 bogeys for Hideki. Wouldn't even hate an over on that, if we're being honest. 3.5 bogeys for, I'd actually maybe even an under on Max Homa bogeys, but he's not playing the cleanest golf right now. That would definitely be a little bit of a risky pick because he's so inaccurate off the tee right now that he could rack up 4 bogeys. I could see that happening for him. Sam Burns at 10 greens, Brian Harman at 10.5 greens. Maybe it is going to be these two. Maybe we do that. JT's at 72 strokes. Honestly, maybe not the worst under spot. Again, earlier tee time helps him out, but a player in general that I think is capable of that bounce back. So I don't know if they have a lineup for his strokes. I don't believe they do. I know Draftkings doesn't. Let's see if FanDuel does. Perhaps they can bail us out here. So no line for JT, and then Caesars. We'll double check on this site. My guess is if the other two sites don't have them up, they probably don't have them up over here. So they do have the Aberg one, so maybe they do. That's a good sign at least because we didn't have a lot of those over there on the PrizePicks. Unfortunate. Yeah, nothing over there on that side. So I don't want to force anything in though, and this Victor prop I feel pretty decent about because even in his decent rounds, he's going to make 3+ bogeys at this golf course, particularly if it plays firm like I'm thinking it's going to. Tony Finau in this fade is the one that I feel a little bit worse about. It is a discrepancy. I believe he was at 72. If we check over here in PrizePicks, you can see, yeah, he's there at the 72 stroke mark. So this is going to be another slip that we take here for the live stream, but I kind of wish that we had a 2.5 bogey line for Tony Finau because I can see him making 3-4 birdies. So like I'd prefer 2.5 bogey line. I think that'd be a little bit safer. But yeah, you can see he's at 3.5 bogeys. So I think I agree with that. We'll take the over on strokes again compared to the sportsbook lines. That should be a pretty decent value. So that's 2 sportsbook line value slips over there on both sites to go out there and mix in. Just enter your underdog slip, of course. Go out there, enter the second one if you haven't already seen that. And thoughts on Aberg under 71.5. Could have easily shot -3 today. Let me see. What site is that on? So he's even money, by the way, at that line on sportsbooks, which is interesting. They've got him at a pure 50-50 split. What is his projection on each side? So he's 71 over there on Underdog. And then I'm guessing the 71.5 is on PrizePicks, right? And I think you said it on your comment, actually. My bad. Let's see. So he's already bumped down. So I'm not sure what site. Maybe you're getting him on just a different sportsbook like FanDuel or something like that. I think that there's a decent amount of potential there. I mean, obviously, round 1 went out there, killed that kind of line. I think the scoring average is going to be between half a stroke over, maybe a stroke over par, maybe even worse than that if my firm narrative ends up coming true. So I'd say I'm like a 7 out of 10 on that one. The form's definitely there for Aberg. if there's a player to take it under on strokes for, it's a player that's in form, that has most of their game together. And even in his shakier performance today, he wasn't dreadful in any one of the 4 stat categories. So in fact, if we go over here to the live stats, take a look at what he did here in round 2. Ludwig Aberg gained on approach, actually did quite a bit of work around the green, but lost a little bit with the putter and then lost off the tee, which if anything, he's usually a pretty decent putter. He could spike out there in any given round, and then off the tee is his thing. So for him to lose off the tee is something that I'm not all that worried about. I think he'll bounce back as early as tomorrow. And if he does anything with the flat stick, it's probably a low round for Ludwig. Let's see. So I like that. So 71.5. So if you're asking about that prop, it's probably pretty decent. All right. Let's take a look at a few matchups. So I know we had a question about that before. Let me see if Hard Rock has anything up. So let me just bring that up real quick, and I'll share my screen again. Let's see. Got to sign in so you guys can't see my password. That wouldn't be fair to myself. Go in there, hack my account. All right, here we go. We're logged. We're at least onto the site. I'm not logged in, but sometimes they have a board up this early. Sometimes they don't. If they don't, we'll just go to one of the other sites here. So they do have some head-to-heads posted, which if it's a tie on these head-to-heads, you do get voided, which are normally the props that I like to look at. So I'm not sure if it's going to be the same head-to-heads on all the sports books out there, but this will give you a good idea for the kind of players that I'm looking at. So these top 2 players, it's probably not one I'd see a huge edge on. I would definitely prefer Scotty there, but he is juiced, minus 165. So again, not one that I see a massive edge on. You've got this Hovland versus Xander Schauffele prop. I agree with that, but this one, minus 135, it's not the worst head-to-head in my opinion. I really do favor him quite significantly over somebody like Hovland, especially with his lack of form, right? It's only been like 6 rounds where he's truly been back to that normal form that he's used to. You got Aberg versus Morikawa. Maybe you want to take a shot against the torn meniscus and take Morikawa there. I also just really like Morikawa this week. So at plus 105, I don't think that that's the worst in the head-to-head where the tie would end up getting voided. Let's see. Hideki versus Siwoo. I don't hate that at all. I think Hideki is just a much better player than Siwoo Kim. Henley Thigala. I think Thigala is just a better player than Russell Henley is. So these ones with the ties and where you have to like bet the draw, I don't really like playing. So if you have access to these kind of matchups on your sportsbook, I would stick to these. And if you have these specific matchups, even better out there for your own exposure. If there's any, I know we had somebody asking about them before. If there's any that you want my take on, let me know down in chat right now. I'll give you my take on those specific matchups. But these are the ones on Hard Rock Bet, which if you're down here in Florida, this is the sportsbook you have access to that I would consider. It's the most juice I would really take would be like a minus 135. You know, the minus 165 on Scotty, I'd probably even consider taking that as well. But the minus 135 on that, you know, Schauffele versus Hovland is probably as much into the juice that I'll go. Most of them are going to be close to even money, maybe even plus money like we have there at Morikawa. So this is what I would stick with for your exposure out there on that side. DK matchups. Let me know if you have any specifically to go through, but I can't bet those myself. Do I like Cole tomorrow? You know, I'm probably like a 6 out of 10 on him. So, yeah, I wouldn't really say that I like him, but I far from hate him. I think that he's a good talent. He's starting to show some form for once. And, you know, I think there's worse options, that's for sure. But, like, yeah, like a 6 out of 10. Antonio says, what would the head-to-head line be, you're saying? If I would handicap Prime Tiger versus Scotty in a single round, probably like minus 175 Tiger, maybe minus 200 Tiger. Full event, like minus 250 Tiger Woods. I don't think it's particularly close. I think that Prime Tiger Woods is a whole lot better than what we're seeing from Scotty right now. And I think time will tell with that. I think you'll see that over the next few months. Scotty potentially tail off a little bit. So we'll have to see. I don't think it's going to happen this week. I think he's probably going to win this golf tournament. But, yeah, definitely give me Prime Tiger all day. That's all I've got out here for this live stream, though, guys. Hopefully you feel a little bit more prepared for the next day of action. Smash the like button if you haven't already. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of the content to come, which, of course, out there for round 4, we'll be doing the same thing, running it right back. So make sure to tune in for that. If you're subscribed, you'll get a notification when I'm going live. And, of course, over there on my Twitter/X, I'll be putting a notification out there for when I'm going live as well. So make sure to check out all of that. Best of luck out there with your exposure. And see you guys out there for that live stream tomorrow.